Hey archery friends, today what we're going to talk about is when you get to your first class, how do you know which arrow length to pick out? It's really important to pick out the correct arrow length. And the reason why is if you pick out an arrow that's too short, it could end up becoming dangerous. So I'm going to show you some little tips and tricks today on when you get to class, how to know if it's the right size arrow for you. In all my beginning classes, one of the first things I tell my archers before we pick out equipment is to make sure you get the correct arrow length, that you pick out the correct length of arrows. I have all different sizes because I have youth in my classes and I also have adults in my classes. So what I've done today is I brought two different lengths of arrows, as you can see right here. And I am going to show you, one, I'm going to show you why it can become dangerous to have an arrow that is not the right arrow length for you. And then two, I'm going to show you how to find an arrow that is the correct length for you. So we're going to go over both of those things today. So by the end of this video, you're going to feel comfortable when you go to an archery class or go to your first day of archery. You'll know which arrows to pick out for you. Now, if you are going out to an archery range with your own equipment, then more than likely, if you've gone to an archery shop, they've already measured you and you are fit and you are good to start shooting. So everything should be okay. The biggest thing that you're going to want to check also is if you buy your arrows online and you're not really sure when you first start out what you're buying, as soon as you get those arrows that come to you, make sure that you do this little arrow test that I'm about to show you just to make sure that you picked out the correct length of arrows. At the end, I will also show in this video a good way to measure about what your draw length, the length of your arrow should be. So that way, if you are ordering online, then it kind of gives you an idea about how many inches, how the length of what your arrow should be, okay? All right, so the first thing I told you I was gonna show you was why does it matter? Why would it be dangerous if you picked out a short arrow versus a long arrow, okay? So the first arrow I'm gonna show you is gonna be a arrow that's long, okay? This is the longer arrow. Now, when you pull back, you're gonna set up, okay? And then you're gonna pull all the way back to the corner of your smile. And as you can see, the arrow is sticking out in front of bow. That looks good, that's nice and safe. All right, so now I'm gonna go for the arrow that was shorter. I'm gonna set it on the bow. I'll load it here. I'm gonna set up, and I'm gonna pull all the way back, same thing to the corner of my smile, but as you can see, now the arrow is coming behind the arrow rest. It's come off the arrow rest. And if I am new to archery and I don't realize that it just came off the arrow rest and I go to shoot, if you pull back too far, as you can see, that can get really dangerous. I'm gonna actually unload it to show you. Okay? Because then it could come way back here and then you could get obviously a big injury in archery. So this is why you want to make sure when you're going out to shoot that you pick the correct length of arrow. So I'm going to show you right now, how do you pick out the right arrow length? All right, so what you're going to do is you're going to take an arrow. Okay, I'm going to stand here so you can see. And you're going to take the knock. That's the end of the arrow here. You're going to stick it against your chest. Put your hands out in front of you and make sure the arrow is about 2 inches longer than your longest fingertip. As you see on this arrow, it's plenty more than 2 inches. Okay, so this arrow is definitely gonna be safe for me to shoot. So this arrow would be okay when you're first starting out to shoot an arrow this length. Now I'm gonna take the second arrow that I had. This is the shorter arrow. I'm gonna take the knock, stick it against my chest, put my hands out, and as you can see, now you don't even see the arrow at all. This arrow would be too short. If you're just barely seeing the tip of the arrow, too short. You want to make sure it's at least, especially when you're first starting out shooting archery, at least 2 inches longer than your longest fingertip. This is all based on the idea that you are coming back to the corner of the smile. So let me show you here. I'm taking the arrow that is safe for me, and I'm going to pull back to the corner of my smile. All right, so do you see how this is nice and safe? Now, if you get to archery and you don't use this as your reference point, the corner of your smile, and you decide that you're gonna pull way back here, the arrow test I just showed you is not gonna be effective, okay? You're gonna be pulling back, overdrawing, pulling back too far, And that test right there is not gonna matter the length of the arrow because you're pulling way past where you're supposed to be for your draw length. All right, so if you come way back here, as you can see now the arrow's getting shorter. Luckily enough, I picked out a really long arrow to bring today, so it's still sticking out just a little bit. But if you get an arrow that's just about 2 inches longer than your longest fingertip and you decide to pull all the way back to your ear when you're shooting, then the arrow could still come off that arrow rest. So make sure that you realize and you know that that arrow test is good as long as you're pulling back just to the corner of your smout. This is your anchor position. You don't want to anchor way back here when you're shooting archery. We've talked about that in a lot of the videos. Always go for longer arrows instead of the shorter arrows. When you become a little bit more advanced at archery, you can start going to get your draw length measure, getting your arrows cut down, and everything will be okay. But when you're first starting out, I always recommend make sure, especially if you're borrowing other people's arrows, check that arrow like we learned today, and make sure that arrow is sticking out at least 2 inches past your longest fingertip. It's okay, just remember on your first day of archery, it's okay if an arrow is too long. You just never want the arrow too short. Have a great day.